bagoan sa tuyang pag-break, no? So saro sa mga requirement, no? Nabasa ko sa nadang ko sa sarong podcast, no? So digdidaad minsan nagfo-fall short, no? So miracle needed, no? Through the intercession of that saint, no? Na mahiling talagang pagtubod, real faith. So kadaklan talaga means piga ano nila so mga medical na healing na to the intercession kan mga santo. No, so, yan po. Mga tiwala, ngunya na si Mana, nagkapirang santo, no, an sa tuyang pig rumdum, no. Kang Lunes, kang Martes, no. As in, digdi sa tuyang diocese kan November 5, no, igwaning sarong santo na sa tuyang pinagrumdum, si Saint Vincent Ferrer no kadakol kan sa iyang parokya digdi sa satuyang sa satuyang diocese malangani duman sa sa Mauraro Saint Vincent yata sa Tabaco no duman sa iyang igwaning shrine of Saint Vincent Ferrer no so ang kay Saint Vincent is I think it's April or May no pero dyan sa Bigaa saro man siyang mimidbidunta ngunya na aldaw na ini no sa pagmidbid niya to kan mga santo no tangani na sabi ko baga po mamidbidan lamang niya to and then makako akita nin sa tuyang mga pang-aarugan no maging modelo niya to sa satong pagtubod no models of faith no tanganing igwa kita ning aarugan mahihilingan tanganing ma-inspire kita sa satuyang pagbuhay digdi sa daga sa padagos na pag-utob kan kabutan kan satong mahal na Dios no so the first saint that we have just remembered this week no kang Lunes no his feast day is November 3. He is the patron of mixed race, no? So mga African American, Filipino American, Filipino Italian, mga arukan Chinese American, no? Because ini garo igwa siya ning African descent, no? He is the patron of barbers, no? Mga barbero. Patron of public health workers, no? So also he is patron of innkeepers, no? Anong innkeepers? So mga siguro may mga sadiring hotels, no? Mga sadiring mga dormitories, no? So he is patron of these people, no? Patron of mixed race, no? The barbers, public health and innkeepers. He was beatified by Pope Gregory the 16th in 1837 and canonized by John the 23rd in 1962. So who is this saint? Saint Martin de Porres. Nasaro po siyang, I think, Dominican. No? So, Saint Martin de Porres was born in Lima, Peru on December 9, 1579. Martyr was an illegitimate son to a Spanish gentleman and a freed slave from Panama of African or possibly Native American descent. No, kaya baga po ang features ni Martin de Porres, no, medyo may kulay siya. He is a man of color, no? Medyo maitom, no? And then kinky ang buhok. No? At a young age, Martin's father abandoned him with his mother and his younger sister, leaving Martin to grow up in poverty. After spending just 2 years in primary school, Martin was placed with a barber surgeon where he would learn to cut hair and medical arts. As Martin grew older, he experienced great deal of ridicule of being a mixed race. So in Peru, by law, all descendants of Africans or Indians were not allowed to become full members of religious order. Martin, who spent long hours in prayer, found his only way into the community he longed for was to ask the Dominicans of the Holy Rosary Priory of Lima to accept him as a volunteer who performed the most menial task in the monastery. No, so ano ini menial? Suga mga mapagal na trabaho, no, na hinagad niya. So in return, he would be allowed to wear the habit and live within the religious community. When Martin was 15, he asked for the admission into the Dominican convent of the Rosary in Lima and was received as a servant boy and eventually moved up to the church officer in charge of distributing money to the poor. So, inisunaging task ni Martin de Porres kang yaon siya duman sa kumbento when he entered the Dominican priory. During his time in the convent, Martin took on his old trades of barbering and healing. So, kang yaon siya duman. No? So, naukudan niya duman. Sabi katabaga pa kaya, he was placed with a barber and surgeon where he spent to cut hairs and medical arts. No? He also worked in the kitchen, did the laundry, and cleaned. After 8 more years with the Holy Rosary Priory, Martin was granted a privilege to take his vows as a member of the Third Order of Saint Dominic by the prior Juan de Lorenzana, who decided to disregard the strict restricting Martin based on race. However, not all members of the Holy Rosary Convent were open-minded. Martin was called horrible names and mocked for being illegitimate and descending from slaves. Martin grew to become a Dominican lay brother in 1603. At the age of 24, 10 years later, after he had been presented with the religious habit of a lay brother, Martin was assigned to the infirmary, where he would remain in charge until his death. He became known for encompassing the virtues, need to carefully and patiently care for the sick, even in the most difficult situation. Martin was praised for his unconditional care for all people, regardless of race or wealth. He took care of everyone from the Spanish nobles to the African slaves. Martin didn't care if the person was deceased or dirty. He would welcome them into his own home. Martin's life reflected his great love for God and on all of God's gift. It is said he had made extraordinary abilities, including aerial flights, bilocation, instant cure, miraculous knowledge, spiritual knowledge, and excellent relationship with animals. No? So, nag-levitate, nag-float, no? Bilocation, no? Na yaong pa sa nadigdi, he is also present in another place, no? At the same time, no? This is what we call bilocation. And then this is also one of the identified na mga nangyari kay Bishop Kamumot, no, of Karkar, Cebu, who is venerable, no, that it was said na si Bishop Kamumot, I'm referring to Bishop Kamumot po, no, na aksidente siya on his way to a mass, but he bilocated, nag-celebrate pa siya kang misa. No, iti ini su number 1 na naging su mystery duman sa iya, no. Na-aksidente siya pero nagmisa pa siya, no. And then the offerings kang misa dinara kang mga tao duman sa simbahan, ta sabi kang padi, sabi ka to ni Bishop Kamumot, wala siyang sakayan. So the offerings were delivered to his church, no. And when they returned, they could not believe na sabi nila, nagmisa pa sa ngaya si Father Kamumot, Bishop Kamumot ngaya, digdi. But the time, what with an accident. So si Martin de Porres was also like that. He has bilocations and instant cures. So very holy. Banalo na maray. Na yaon an sa naging kamot, yaon sa iyang kamot kan Diyos. That there were instant cures. Martin also founded an orphanage for abandoned children and slaves, and is known for raising dowry for young girls in short amount of time. During the epidemic in Lima, many of the friars in the convent of the Rosary became ill. Locked away in a distant section of the convent, they were kept away from the professed. However, on more than one occasion, Martin passed through the locked doors to care for the sick. Naglaog. Locked doors pero nakalaog si Martin. However, he became disciplined for not following the rules of the convent. But after replying, "Forgive me my error and please instruct me, for I did not know that the precepts of obedience took precedence over that of charity," he was given the full liberty to follow his heart in mercy. Martin was a great friend to Saint Juan Maxias, a fellow Dominican lay brother, and Saint Rose of Lima, a lay Dominican. In January of 1639, when Martin was 60 years old, he became very ill. Fevers, tremors causing him agonizing pain. He would experience almost a full year of illness until he passed away in November 3. So minsan po mga santo, ang pag-celebrate kan sa indang mga feast day on the day of their death. In the day of their birth in heaven. So minsan arog po kayan. But there are some, especially martyrs, whose dates were not really specifically known. Arog kan duwang santo digdi sa Pilipinas, kay Saint Lorenzo Ruiz and kay Saint Pedro Calungsod, the day of their canonization. Si Pedro Calungsod baga po, at the beginning, his feast was celebrated on April 2. But since April 2 always fall on the weeks or days of Lent, na day tira pwede mag-celebrate. So it was moved on the day of his canonization every October 21. So kaya po pinagpalit so aldaw taning mas makaselebrate, kasi kung Lenten season di man anggad mas-celebrate talagang tultul ka mga Pilipino. So it was moved. So Martin de Porres died in November 3. By the time he died, he was widely known, accepted. Talks of his miracles in medicine and caring for the sick were everywhere. After his death, the miracles received when he was invoked in such greatness that when he was exhumed 25 years later, his body exhaled a splendid fragrance and was still intact. So some saints are like this, so mga ipig-apod na incorruptible. So intact pa ang mga lawas ninda, mga fresh pa, an sa indang hawak. So when Saint Martin was exhumed, kasi kay puan sa mga santo po, kay puan ng physical na so hawak ninda pigihiling pigbubuksan. Kaya baga po si Saint John Paul II, his remains were exhumed, and brought duman sa taas sa main church and basilica ni Saint Peter. So Saint Martin de Porres was beatified on October 29, 1837. He has now become the patron saint of mixed race, innkeepers, barbers, public health, and more. His feast day is November 3. Mga katiwala, mabalik tabi kita pagkatapos kan pagpamibi niya to kan Angelus.